Sup my dudes, Valkyr. Today I have my tier list for you guys. I'm going to be going over it. I'm not going to be like moving it around like I did before. I'm more so going to be explaining the placements, what they mean, why each one is where it is. You'll realize as the tier list goes that there's quite a lot of ways you can use your units in this game. There's quite a lot of uses for different units. It's why there's so many different tiers. And I'm going to be explaining which each one is and exactly why they're there in that spot. But yeah, let's go ahead, let's get into it, and let's see exactly, let me talk about it. So at the very top we have money. Bulma is definitely the #1 unit in the game for money generation. She just generates a ton of money with stuff like CEO hat, percentage increases, and going to top path. Basically, Challenge Rift meta has gotten so optimized to the point where you can fully max out top path Bulma by about like wave 9, I want to say. Even getting your defenses up, you're going to have a maxed out Bulma waves between 7 to 9 if you do a very optimized route. Sanji, for the same reason, really good for money. He also buffs at the same time, so he's just, I mean, you could also put Sanji like here-ish or something like that. I do need to move her up, so we're going to move her to right there. But that's basically where we're at with this. So next up is best damage in the game. Best unit overall, Broly. Shocker to nobody, Broly's base damage is more than triple than any other units in the game. So, I mean, not more than triple, more than double any other units in the game. So him having insanely high base damage, whenever you plug that into multipliers, he hits exponential scaling. And you can see something like, I've seen people reach like 43 million attacks at Broly's within Challenge Rift, having double Omnipotent on him. Very busted. So outside of Broly, let's go ahead, step into Challenge Rift meta. These are the units that I believe are the best ones to have as your primary damage character inside Challenge Rift. First off is the hardest unit in the game to get, because you need 4 copies at a 0.1% chance, good luck, of Toji. Toji Fushiguro, you need 4 copies of to fully rank up and max out and get that sweet 25% base damage boost, making him easily the hardest unit in the game to get. Even harder than the Battle Pass units. I guess technically the only one harder to get now is Broly since he's unobtainable, but Toji is absolutely the hardest unit in the game to get and build, so he justifiably is like second best to Broly overall in the game, but he's not really useful in infinites for pushing really far, whereas Broly has such high base attack he actually is. Toji I don't think is going to be that useful for infinites, based on the fact that he's cone, because you're really only going to use top path. Based on the fact that he's cone and the fact that he's not going to be able to reach such high highs. But in terms of Challenge Rift, Toji's really good. Toji, with his fat cone, is going to be able to abuse the Mangekyo Sharingan. The only downside to Toji is the fact that he is lined up until that point. So you really have to speed run the upgrades and get him up and running before the enemy crashes into your back. And the fact that Toji has such short range as well makes it so you're really forced to try to run Nami with him. It makes him really expensive to get up and running, but if you are able to reach that price point and able to get his top path fully operational, he should be able to just kind of destroy everything and abuse the ever-living hell out of the Mangekyo Sharingan, simply because the rewind is so powerful that it just kind of warps everything around it. Speaking of abusing Mangekyo Sharingan, we have Madara himself. Madara, top path upgrade 4, very cheap to get to a full AoE, and at that point he can start controlling the entire map and basically doing a whole ton of work using the Mangekyo Sharingan, making Madara exceptional, absolutely insane for going ahead and clearing out Challenge Rift. Madara is very good for this, so yeah, Madara is very strong. Next up is Zoro. Zoro, once again, is a unit that can absolutely abuse the ever-living hell out of the Mangekyo Sharingan, making him a very good option for Challenge Rift, because he is not insanely expensive to go ahead and get to his full AoE option, and he also has a very fat line as well. So you really don't want Omnipotent on Zoro, because you want to be able to take advantage of the multi-placements, because Mangekyo Sharingan is a per-placement cooldown. Next up is Whitebeard, probably the most underrated unit in the game. A lot of people think his bottom path is a doo-doo, whenever his bottom path is actually insane. His bottom path is probably his more busted path. It's actually, in my opinion, his only busted path, because top path to me isn't that good, but bottom path just dumpsters out damage. So a lot of people don't understand how the bottom path for Madara and bottom path for Whitebeard works. Toji Fushiguro has the exact same bottom path, and the fact that how it functions is these bottom paths of these 3 units function on separate SPAs. Each attack has its own SPA and the SPAs that you see. So even though it's a 3.2 SPA, they're really doing like 1 attack every SPA, or 1 attack every 2 SPA, or something like that. Especially whenever you consider animation lock. Yeah, basically they're turboing out attacks, and the fact that Whitebeard cycles between full AoE, circle, and cone makes it so he's able to absolutely dumpster out an extraordinary amount of damage and abuse the ever-living hell out of Mangaka Sharingan, making it so he's very, 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 very powerful if you can get him to that full AoE upgrade. The issue is getting there. You need a lot of money to actually be able to reach that point. So next up, we have a brand new category that I believe Sukuna introduced, because Sukuna has very big flaws, but he has really, really good strengths. I think he's a balanced unit. I don't think by any means he's like insane, but he kind of created his own category because he's so strong whenever you actually get him to a certain point, and that is sub DPS. These are units that basically, they're not going to be your main damage dealers, but they're going to offer alternative forms of damage because you have multiple bus stations with multiple placements, so you can set up multiple bus stations across a map, making it so a sub DPS option is definitely something to look at. So Sukuna, I'm going to be honest with you, outside of his final 2 upgrades, which is top 5 and bottom 5, is pretty ass. He's not very good until you hit those 2. But those 2 are so goddamn strong that they make it so he is a really, really good good damage dealer once you get those upgrades. So you need somebody to actually be able to survive the early waves, which is literally any of these 5. That way you can set up Sukuna to go ahead and start turboing out damage, because Sukuna has the highest DPS potential in the game due to exponential scaling and DOT applications, which I believe this is how DOT should function. DOT should always have the highest damage potential output because it's damage over time. Sukuna has the highest damage potential potential DPS in the game. Thanks to that, for example, if you get Sukuna up to a 500k attack stat, which is with bus stacking is very achievable, he's doing like 5 million damage per hit, which is a ton. That's a lot. If you can get Sukuna up to like a 1 million attack stat, he's doing 10 million damage a hit, right? This is what I mean by how Sukuna is absolutely insane. Sukuna is very wacky, just you have to get him to these final upgrades. And then his bottom path is just a nuke. It's just straight up, it's not going to kill any bosses. You're not going to press, it's not like AWTD, we're going to press it and the whole field's gone. You're going to press it, and he's going to wipe out all the small mobs, leaving your main DPS to go ahead and kill the big one. Either that, or you can quickly sell Sukuna and replace him and put him on top, and then he's going to be able to take out the big boy, the big boss. Next up in sub DPS, I didn't really know where to put Batman. Batman's not awful, he's actually good. He just doesn't really have a home, so I figured sub DPS is a good spot for him because he has support capabilities with bottom's path, but realistically you're only using top for the really, really fat Batmobiles that can come out. Batman he's good. He's genuinely a good unit. It's just the way he works is very gimmicky, and it's not really good in Challenge Rift, and it's not good in Infinites. So if you're not good in Challenge Rift, you're not good in Infinites, you're not really good, essentially, because those are the 2 only contents that matter right now that create some form of difficulty. Batman's not really good in either of them, so he's not really in a good spot, but it's more so due to how he functions. I think he is a good kit, and I think he's going to shine maybe in other game modes, but right now I didn't really know where to put him, so I just slotted him in the sub DPS option. So next we get into Infinites. Rimuru is a good point of contention, and I've seen a lot of people saying that they think that they can run Rimuru in Challenge Rift, and I don't think bottom path is very usable, so you're really only using top path, and at that point you're really better off using anyone else on that list, because while Rimuru does do very, very high damage, because of the multi-hit and the lack of AoE coverage until Megadon, which is 14k, I believe, or even that, no, that's single target. Megadon's single target. Even whenever he gets to his 200k upgrade, which you're realistically not going to get in Challenge Rift, he doesn't have good enough AoE coverage to abuse Mangekyo, which is currently the meta in Challenge Rift. So, I do believe if you wanted to go ahead and take a really invested Rimuru and full send it to Challenge Rift 100, that's definitely possible, but for the most part, he basically has the hypothetical highest potential damage in an AoE, because of the fact that you can just full send his attack with the 200k upgrade top path, and he gets full AoE, and then you're also going to have the doppelganger follow-up, so basically whatever his attack stat is, double it and give it to the next person. Basically, he's going to be able to do a ton of damage and do it very, very well in very high AoE, or very, very good size AoE, because it's infinite, so you can run a bunch of buffers and stuff like that and go kind of crazy with all that. So next up is Mob. Realistically, Sakuya should be right behind Rimuru in terms of infinite damage dealers. I have Sakuya on her own tier because Sakuya basically got fully power crept by Rimuru. I'll get into that in a second. But realistically speaking, Sakuya should be right here. I'm going to throw that out right here, but I'm going to put Sakuya in her own tier because she's in a spot where she needs to either be reworked or buffed or something. And I'll go over that in a second. But next up is Mob. Mob is an infinite scaling full AoE unit. His bottom path is 2 RNG to actually consider, so we're just going to ignore bottom path. Doesn't exist. Top path only. The fact that he is a full AoE, he also applies stun, a very small stun, but he does full AoE, and he's an infinite scaling attack. He has infinite attack scaling, makes it so he has potential, but to get there and see that potential is a lot of work, and it's not really worth it. Next up is going to shock a lot of people, Byakuya. Why is Byakuya an infinite? Full AoE, good base damage, good everything. The reason he is an infinite and not challenge rift is he's too expensive. The price gap between going 2-2 all the way up to his top path, I believe, is 10k. Unless you have like CEO plus Key of Kings, at that point you're not running Mangekyo, you are just not going to be able to do it. Even CEO reduces it to 7,500. If you have double CEO, it, let's say, reduces him down to 5k, and at that point it's still extremely expensive to start that full AoE top path. It's too pricey. It's not really viable inside Challenge Rift. It needs to be somewhere around 3 to 4k to actually be even considered. At that point, you're looking at a very potential one, but where it is right now, it's just not viable. Next up is Eren Yeager because of his top path. His bottom path is good, but the line is a little too skinny to be used in Challenge Rift, and then his top path is way too expensive to be used in Challenge Rift. But using it in Infinite, he really lacks range, and he has so little range, I don't think you can make up for it with artifacts and traits like you do in the other ones, and the fact that he's a damage dealer on top of it, trying to double stack the hell out of traits just to make up for the range deficit means you're losing out on a ton of potential damage. So I don't really think that he is all that good right now. I would put him actually somewhere like right here, right? But I know where to put him. It's Infinite because that's the only spot you're using him. Basically, you would be using Eren kind of just as like a cope option to hit the 50 waves a day or something. I guess that's like the only place you'd really use him. But yeah, his range is a massive deal breaker. And this game, because of the way SPAs work and how low SPAs are naturally, range tends to be the biggest stat in the game, and he is absolutely lacking in that in every regard. So next up is Sakuya, everyone's favorite maid, everyone's favorite Dio maid. Sakuya is a decent unit, but the issue is she got fully power crept by Rimuru. Anything Sakuya does except the time stop and slow, I gotta make that very clear, Sakuya's time stop and slow in top path does make her somewhat unique, but considering that most people focus on her bottom path, which is the buff and the massive damage boost, anything Sakuya does, Rimuru does better. Rimuru has a more generally applicable buff in bottom path and has better potential damage output in top path due to exponential scaling because the double attacks with doppelganger. Rimuru just ends up becoming better version of Sakuya. The only thing Sakuya really has going over Rimuru is the native 3 placements, so you can get the damage Sakuya as well as the support Sakuya. With Rimuru, you are forced to choose. However, like I said, it's just Sakuya needs at this point to either have more focus and more strength put into her top path, because her top path pricing is entirely unusable in anything outside of Infinites, and whenever it comes to Infinites, she's been fully power crept by Rimuru, so her entire identity has been taken basically, and just something needs to happen with this character, because I don't think she's in a very good spot at the moment. So next up is meta supports. Number 1, Sakura. The reason Sakura is the number 1 meta support is her ability to abuse the Uta Uta no Mi. Uta Uta no Mi does everything. It is an amazing artifact. It is probably my favorite artifact in the game. Uta Uta no Mi is just really damn good. And Sakura at 70 cost to place abuses the ever-living shit out of it and makes it so you can get a ton of value out of the Uta Uta no Mi. So that's really good. Next up is Steve. Because of the Mythic Ascension bug, which if you guys don't know, it's going to get fixed. I got to make a video covering Seb's announcements on that. But because of the Mythic Ascension bug, basically, Steve's 250% attack boost is actually somewhere around like 375, and because of exponential scaling and the way that actually works, it ends up being so much more because the way the math works out in this game, the big fat attack boost you get from Steve is going to be one of the main reasons you can push really high in Challenge Rift. Our Infinites, Steve is by far the most important buffer in the game. Speaking of most important, comes in the second most important, Shinobu. She just buffs everything. She buffs range, attack, and speed. Really solid. After that comes Nami. Nami is going to buff your crit rate, your crit damage, and your range. Next up is Jotaro with a really good slow at a good cost if you invest a ton in him. And lastly is All Might. So All Might recently got a heavy nerf. All Might is now more DPS focused than he is support focused because his bottom path essentially got killed. His top path is still usable if you feel like using him as a sub DPS, but then I just think he's like as good as these guys in terms of damage, so it's like he'd be like here instead. But his bottom path, it got nerfed and it got killed for a couple reasons, and I'll explain why. So what they did was they basically just removed all the range from his bottom path, making it so it's full AoE in a very small circle now, even if you invest into it. So, because of that, you are forced into running specific artifacts and specific setups to go ahead and try to compensate for the lack of range that is now created due to the buff. And if you do not do that, then that means he has potential because these two buffs here are targeted buffs. All Might has potential because you have to put him closer to whatever you're trying to buff because the reduced range to go ahead and interrupt these buff cycles. And it's going to make the buff looping so much more difficult because one of the two things he did with his insane range before was the fact that he was able to go ahead and abuse things like Death Note in full AoE and Mangekyo Sharingan in full AoE, allowing more variance in DPS so you could have more playroom in DPS and try other artifacts on your main damage dealer while still taking advantage of the fact that it's a Mangekyo meta by applying the Mangekyo to your support. Basically, them ruining the range of All Might completely killed his support capabilities because now he has the lowest attack buff in the game outside of Rimuru. Rimuru's only 10%, All Might's 25% if I remember correctly. He has the second lowest attack buff in the game. His range is too short now to accurately, basically, are to not mess with our already existing buff cycles because before you could place him way away and his range was so big that he could take advantage of it and pretty much buff people from a mile away. And he also cannot abuse artifacts anymore, so you have to put your Mangekyo back on your main damage option. TLDR of it, I think the nerf sucks. I think the nerf really sucks. It feels really bad, and I think support All Might's dead. So if you want to consider him sub DPS, like I said, he can go here or he can go here. I think, like I said, I don't think he's as good as Batman and Sukuna. So I would just put him down here with these guys, and yeah. All Might's pretty much dead off that. So next up is okay, but I don't know where to put them, which is Dio, Vader, and Harry Potter. I think Harry Potter, if you guys don't know, Harry Potter just got a recent buff to where he's basically long-range heavy artillery. I think it's cool. I think it's very funny, but at the same time, I don't think it's anything crazy. I don't think it's breaking the bank. I don't think he's going to be able to work into a sub DPS slot because I don't think he offers enough for it in terms of damage. I don't think he offers enough CC to be in a support slot. So he's kind of in this weird spot where he doesn't do enough damage to be a sub DPS. Definitely is not a main DPS because of his AoE sizes. And he's not a support because of how long it takes between his CC. So he's kind of just there. I think he's a good unit. I don't think they need to change his numbers anymore. It's just he doesn't really have a place in the current meta. Speaking of that, Darth Vader, they buffed his top path finally. They made it so his Force Choke has much more uptime, which is really good. It now, I believe, is on a 14-second SPA, which is good because his top path fucking sucks with the AoE size. Excuse my language, but it is awful. So it definitely needed something, but I don't think it's enough to put him anywhere here because he's too expensive for sub DPS. His AoE sizes suck for main damage. So are you just going to run him in infinites and consider him an infinite damage dealer, but then he doesn't do anywhere near the damage these guys can do? So are we going to put him in support, but he has too high of an SPA? So where do you put him? I don't know. Yeah, that's the point of this whole tier. I don't know. Same up with Dio. Dio isn't insanely expensive, but he is costly enough to the point where I can't put him in sub DPS. His range is not good enough to be in sub DPS. He has some good AoEs. I believe his bottom path, I want to say, the one where he slams the stop sign and does multiple attacks. That one actually has decent AoE. It's just like, where do I put this guy kind of thing, right? Because he has some support capabilities with the time stop. Dio's kind of just in a iffy spot. I really don't know. Next up in the tiers, we have Screwed by Rarity, which means that these units are the lowest rarity in the game. Even if you make them mythic, they're just not very good. It's because inherent issues. So Goku, first off, his very skinny line, not good. And then if you go top path, I think his range just isn't that good either. Naruto, Screwed by Range. And then Sneaky Clone, Screwed by Range. They all are very expensive for what they offer. Their range is nowhere near, and I've already explained how range is probably one of the biggest stats in the game. Yeah, even Zoro has really small range, but luckily he has full AoE to compensate. But these guys, they have small range and not much else going for them. So yeah, they're just, yeah, not very good. Needs buffs / is bad. Worst unit in the game is still Luke. This is a kit issue. Luke has an awful kit, just to put it simple. I'm like 90% sure you could not fix this unit unless you overtune the numbers to hell, at which point he just becomes broken. So as funny as it would be to have Luke being the best damage dealer in the game, I think he's just always going to be the worst unit in the game, which is fine, because now you have a bar that, if a unit's worse than Luke, then you really messed up, because his kit just sucks. Next up is Ichigo. Ichigo is ruined by his very skinny lines. He has insane cost for what he gets. He has very poor coverage with his lines. So basically, he costs too much, his range sucks, and then his AoE coverage is awful. Ichigo's just not very good. I know that's going to shock a lot of people because his attack stat can get really high, Valk. Yeah, your attack stat being 5 billion doesn't matter if you're hitting one enemy in a wave of 30. It doesn't mean a whole lot. You're still going to bleed out. You're still going to like lose a lot of targeting. It's just not good. Like, you're going to end up losing based off that. Next up is Rengoku. Remember how I said range is the most important stat in the game? Guess who's lacking it the absolute most? Rengoku here. Rengoku lacks a lot of range. He lacks damage. He's meant to be a cheap source of damage for story. Shocker, making a unit that's good for story whenever its story is basically beatable by any unit once you actually have money up and running is pretty silly. Because you can take Batman even and just absolutely destroy story as a new player using an epic Batman. So whenever you pull a mythic and it's Rengoku and he's designed to function off of a budget, once you no longer have that budget because you have serviceable money units, you no longer need such a thing, and it just becomes absolutely doo-doo. So Rengoku needs massive buffs. Hopefully they really focus on the range and get his range up and running, get him to a serviceable level, because what he's at right now isn't very good. Anyways, that's the tier list. Thank you guys for watching as always. Hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. Catch you guys in the next one. Peace.